The wind howled like a mourning widow across the open prairie as Clara Whitmore stood at the edge of town, her travel-worn boots sinking into the rain-softened mud. In her trembling hand was a single letter, its parchment crinkled and stained with droplets of water, or perhaps tears. The ink bled slightly from where her fingers clenched it too tight, as if letting go would confirm it all as real. Don't come. You're not welcome. You lied about who you are. No signature. No warmth. Just rejection in a man's clipped hand. The letter had arrived late. She'd already made the 1,000-mile journey westward by stagecoach and riverboat, risking sickness, storms, and solitude. She'd worn her best blue bonnet for the first meeting, smoothed out her mother's lace-trimmed dress, practiced her smile in the cracked mirror at every rest stop. Now the town she'd dreamed of had no room for her. The sign read Bellstone, Pop 211, though it felt colder than any place she'd known. Eyes watched her from windows. Men on porches whispered, their voices like dry leaves scuttling across the ground. A child pointed and asked his mother too loudly, "Why's that lady got no husband with her?" Clara turned away before she could hear the answer. She had no husband, just a child inside her, barely the size of a plum, conceived not from love, but from the darkest night on the trail, one she never spoke of, not even to herself. It hadn't been a lie. It had been survival. And it hadn't mattered to whoever wrote that damned letter. The postmaster had read her name aloud twice before handing it over like it stank. Whitmore. That you? You might want to read this out back. Clara tucked the letter into her coat, knuckles white, and stepped off the boardwalk into the side alley between the general store and the livery stable. She sat on a low stack of firewood, the town's sour smoke clinging to the morning air. Every breath burned. Someone laughed behind her. A woman's voice, shrill and sharp. Ain't that the one? The one knocked up before she even got here. Another voice joined in, nasal and mean. Heard she was gonna marry Thomas Harrow. Poor man. Dodged a bullet, I'd say. She didn't rise. Didn't fight. She let the shame settle, like dust on her shoulders. A bucket of water hit her from behind. Icy, sudden, and heartless. Her dress clung to her as she gasped. She turned just in time to see a smirking older woman holding the empty pail. "Go on and wash the lies off, girl," the woman hissed. "Ain't no room here for your kind." Clara stood, shaking from more than just a cold. But her words stuck behind her teeth. What could she say? That she hadn't asked for this? That she hadn't chosen the man who left bruises on her skin and a child in her womb? She staggered toward the edge of town, each step pulling her deeper into the slush of humiliation and heartbreak. Her suitcase, the one with her mother's Bible, a baby quilt she'd made on the trail, and her last $2, dragged behind her like a coffin. A drunk on a bench called out as she passed, "You come to save us or shame us, preacher girl?" She didn't answer. The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled, mingling with the icy drops still rolling from her soaked bonnet. Thunder cracked in the distance, low and threatening. The gray sky mirrored her heart, heavy, dark, and unforgiving. She reached a stretch of broken fence just beyond town limits and collapsed beside it, dropping the suitcase and falling to her knees in the dirt. Her breath came in short bursts, not from panic, from defeat, the kind that curls up inside and tells you you're finished. Rain came harder now. Lightning split the sky. Her fingers clawed into the earth, trying to anchor herself to something, anything, that wouldn't give way beneath her. She whispered to no one, "I didn't lie. I didn't lie." But even she wasn't sure if she believed herself anymore. The storm swelled. Wind lashed at her like a whip. Somewhere, a coyote yipped in the distance. She felt the edges of her vision blur. The cold crept through her bones like rot. And the exhaustion, God, the exhaustion, dragged her into the wet ground like an open grave. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was the soft tread of hooves in the mud and a low voice speaking in a language she didn't recognize. A hand touched her shoulder, gentle, firm. She tried to open her eyes, but they were too heavy. She tried to speak, but her lips only moved. Then warmth. She wasn't sure how, but warmth returned. Not from the sky, not from the ground, but from that voice and the arms that lifted her like she weighed nothing at all. The scent of leather, cedar, and smoke enveloped her. And then everything faded. The world went still. And the letter, the one that had broken her, floated off into the wind, carried by the storm, forgotten by those who never wanted her, and replaced by the man who did not speak but acted. And somewhere in that quiet, a story began. One of vengeance, redemption, and a truth too long buried. And Clara Whitmore, though she did not yet know it, had not come to the end of her journey. She had just been found. The world returned to Clara in fragments. Warmth first, thick, animal skin warmth pressed against her like a cocoon. Then the low crackle of fire, wood smoke, the soft rustle of dried herbs hanging above her. And beneath it all, the distinct silence of wilderness, so unlike the cruel muttering of townsfolk. Her eyes fluttered open. A rounded hide ceiling curved above her, dimly lit by firelight. A lodge, not a settler's cabin, not a tent. Something older, stronger. She tried to move, but her limbs protested, weak from exposure and exhaustion. Her fingers found the edge of the blanket covering her. Thick fur, stitched with care. Across from her, crouched near the fire, was a man. He moved with the quiet of someone who knew how not to disturb the world. Long black hair tied behind his neck, broad shoulders wrapped in a deerskin coat, adorned with beads and feathers. He held a bowl in one hand, stirring slowly. The scent reached her, a thick, earthy stew. Clara flinched when he looked at her. His eyes weren't cold. They weren't soft either. They were steady, observing, measuring, not with suspicion, but with caution earned from pain. She tried to speak. Nothing came. Her throat burned. He rose and approached, holding out the bowl. His voice was low, almost gravel. Eat. Her fingers closed around the warm ceramic. She sipped. It tasted of roots, wild onion, meat, strong and unfamiliar but comforting. She swallowed again, letting it spread life back through her. Where? She rasped. Safe, he said simply, then returned to the fire. Clara's thoughts tumbled like leaves in a gust. Had he taken her from the road? Was she a prisoner? No, there were no bindings, no threats in his movements. Only quiet intent. He glanced back at her again. Storm took you. She nodded slowly, voice still raw. You found me. A brief nod. Silence settled between them again, not heavy, but watchful. She clutched the blanket tighter around her shoulders, heart still thudding with uncertainty. The child within her stirred slightly, as if sensing the shift. I'm Clara, she offered softly. He didn't respond right away. Then, Cheyenne. She whispered the name back to herself, letting it settle in her mind like a smooth stone. Cheyenne. He handed her a carved wooden cup filled with warm water, steeped in herbs. She drank, eyes never leaving him. His every movement was efficient. No wasted gestures, no noise. Time passed, though she couldn't tell how much. Outside, the wind rattled through the trees. In here, it was calm. Sacred, almost. Later, as she drifted in and out of sleep, she caught glimpses. Cheyenne tending a drying rack of meat, stringing herbs, sharpening a knife whose handle bore painted feathers. He said little, but his silence wasn't cruel. It was the silence of a man who had seen too much to speak easily. The second day, she found enough strength to stand, though she leaned on the wall of the lodge for balance. He noticed and handed her a walking stick, carved, polished smooth. You walk, you eat more, he said. Then, just barely, the hint of a smile. The smile startled her more than his knife. Outside the lodge, snow glazed the pine trees, and a creek babbled nearby. Animal tracks crossed through the clearing. The world here was untouched, clean. Clara inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with pine and wood smoke. You live here alone? She asked. Cheyenne nodded. Since last winter. Why help me? He didn't answer at first. Then he said, I saw you. At the edge. Mud. Eyes full of broken things. She swallowed. You don't even know what I am. I know enough. Later, while she sat beside the fire, sewing a tear in her skirt, he placed something beside her. A small wooden carving. A bear, round-bellied, upright, eyes carved with care. She looked up. What's this? Mother bear. Strong. Carries cubs. Fights anything. Her eyes burned. No one had called her strong in a very long time. Most had only ever seen the girl on the verge of collapse. She turned the carving in her palm and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't reply, but he sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. That night, she lay awake listening to the wind. It wasn't fear that kept her eyes open. It was the ache of memory. She broke the silence. They said I lied, that I misled him, she stopped herself. Cheyenne didn't move, just waited. I didn't, she said after a while. There were men on the trail. I never told. It didn't seem to matter, until they made it matter. She turned her head to look at him. He stared into the fire, jaw set, eyes unreadable. My people have no word for shame like yours, he said. A life comes, it is a gift. A wound happens, it is the fault of the wound maker, not the wounded. She breathed out slowly. His words wrapped around her like balm. Not pity, not absolution, just truth, spoken simply. On the third day, he returned from hunting with a fresh rabbit and news. I heard riders. From Bellstone. Clara stiffened. Looking for me? Maybe. Or maybe to bury truth. Her fingers tightened around the cup she held. What truth? He crouched beside the fire, set the rabbit down, and met her gaze fully for the first time. They sent those men. Not wild ones. Town men. They wanted your dowry. They took it and left you to die. Her heart hammered. How do you know that? I followed them. Before. I saw the ambush. Heard talk. They laughed about the girl who'd never get there. Her voice broke. Then the letter? Forged. Not from the man you were to marry. From another. She stared at him. Her hands trembled, and the carved bear fell from her lap. All this time, she had thought it was chance. That she was simply unlucky. But it wasn't misfortune. It was betrayal. Deliberate. Vile. I should go to the sheriff, she said, voice rising with heat. He shook his head once. Sheriff wrote the letter. She recoiled as if struck. You will not find justice in Bellstone. Not from them. Then what am I supposed to do? She whispered. Cheyenne looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, You heal. Then we ride. Her heart lurched. She didn't know if that meant vengeance or something more. But something inside her, something hard and long buried, flickered to life. She wasn't done. She had survived the cold, the shame, the silence. Now came the storm. And this time, she wouldn't face it alone. The sun cracked the frost off the trees the morning they rode for Bellstone. Clara gripped the reins tighter than she needed to, fingers white against the worn leather. Cheyenne rode beside her, silent but watchful, the wind pulling his hair behind him like a black banner. He hadn't said much since she agreed to return, but his silence no longer frightened her. It steadied her, like the weight of a drawn bowstring before release. Each hoofbeat brought her closer to the place where everything had broken, and where she'd start to rebuild. The town rose over their eyes, looking smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she had grown. In her spine, in her fire. They dismounted near the tree-line, tying their horses beside a broken corral. The outskirts were quiet, but not empty. Cheyenne's eyes scanned the rooftops, the road, the church steeple, every corner where ambush could hide. Quick, he said, before they smell change coming. Clara nodded, her breath misted in the cold. The bear carving sat tucked in her coat pocket. A reminder she hadn't come back as the girl they shamed. She came back carrying truth and teeth. Their first stop wasn't the sheriff. It was the saloon. Inside, the air reeked of sweat, old whiskey, and worse. A few men glanced up at the door, saw Cheyenne, and shifted uneasily. No one dared speak. Then Clara stepped in after him. Head high, hair pinned back, cheeks flushed from the cold. A glass slipped from a hand and shattered. Thomas Harrow, the man she had traveled across half the country to marry, sat slumped at a table near the rear. His hair was longer, his shirt stained, eyes bloodshot and blinking like he'd seen a ghost. She crossed the floor with slow, deliberate steps, every board creaking beneath her. Thomas looked up and squinted. Clara, he mumbled. Is that really you? She didn't answer, just slapped him. The crack silenced the room. "You let them tell you I ran off," she said. "You let them lie." I didn't know. They told me you never came. The sheriff showed me the letter." Chayton stepped forward, voice cold. "Sheriff wrote it." Thomas blinked. "What?" "He and the McCullough boys staged the attack. Took her dowry. Left her for dead." Thomas pushed away from the table, his face going pale. I didn't know." Clara's voice dropped. "You didn't ask." Before he could stammer another word, she turned away. He wasn't the reason, she returned. He wasn't the one who mattered. They headed next to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Cole sat with his boots propped up, reading a newspaper like the world was simple and predictable. He didn't look up when they entered. "Told you to leave this town, miss," he drawled. "Now you brought a pet savage with you?" Clara didn't flinch. "I brought truth." He looked up slowly, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me." Chayton stepped forward and dropped something on the desk. A handkerchief, embroidered with Clara's initials, bloodstained and torn. "Found near the ambush site." "Found this where you and your men took her wagon," Chayton said. The sheriff scoffed. "That could have been anything. Could have been staged. You people love stories." "I have more than a story," Chayton said. "I followed your men back. Saw where you buried the driver. Took her dowry box for yourselves." Sheriff Cole's jaw twitched. "You making accusations, savage?" "No," Clara cut in. "We're making reckoning." Cole's hand moved toward the rifle on the wall. Chayton moved faster. In one blink he had crossed the room, ripped the rifle down, and thrown it across the floor. It clattered loudly, splinters flying. The sheriff reached for his revolver, but Clara already had hers drawn, small, rusty, but steady in her grip. "Don't," she said, voice shaking but firm. "I'm not that girl in the mud anymore." Footsteps pounded outside. Men, townsfolk, some curious, some complicit. "Won't matter what you say," Cole sneered. "You think anyone will believe a girl who wandered into town pregnant and half dead? Or some red man who camps in the trees?" "I think they'll believe it when we show them where you buried the body," Chayton said, his voice dark as thunderclouds. "Or maybe when we show them the ledgers. The ones we found in your old barn. All the women who went missing before Clara." Cole went still. Clara stepped forward, gun still raised. "I didn't come here to beg for justice. I came to burn the rot out." The sheriff lunged. One shot rang out. He collapsed, clutching his leg, screaming in pain. Outside, the crowd surged toward the doorway, drawn by the sound. Clara stood over him, breathing hard. "Now they'll know." The deputy burst in with his rifle raised, only to see the sheriff on the floor, bleeding and beaten. "What the hell is going on here?" Chayton spoke calmly. "Your boss staged attacks on mail-order brides. Buried their escorts. Took their dowries. She was just the one who lived." The deputy glanced at Clara, then at the crowd outside, listening, murmuring. An old woman stepped inside, Mrs. Brannan, the midwife. She looked at Clara long and hard, then at the sheriff. "I always wondered why so many girls never made it." She turned to the deputy. "You best put him in his own cell, son. We'll sort out the rest." Sheriff Cole roared as the deputy dragged him away. "You'll hang. Both of you. You think a half-breed and a ruined woman can win against me?" Clara holstered her pistol, shoulders squared. "We already did." Outside, the wind picked up. The town felt different now. Not welcoming, but no longer hostile. Thomas tried to catch her on the steps. "Clara, please. I didn't know. I was misled. You can stay. We can." She didn't stop walking. "You believed the lie because it was easier than asking the truth." Chayton waited beside the horses. She mounted up beside him, heart thudding with something more than vengeance. Freedom. As they rode from town, past the hills and trees where snow melted into wild grass, Clara looked down at her stomach. "I don't know what kind of world I'm bringing you into," she whispered to the child, "but I promise it won't be the one I left behind." Chayton glanced over. "Still want justice?" She nodded. "Then we ride." And they did. Not away from the fire, but straight through it. They rode hard, but not to escape. Clara didn't run anymore. She didn't flinch at shadows or hide her face when strangers looked her way. Not after Bellstone. Not after the truth bled into daylight. Not after she faced the man who tried to bury her with lies. The prairie stretched wide before her, golden in the thawing spring, dotted with clusters of pine and the distant shimmer of snow still clinging to the peaks. Every hoofbeat against the thawing earth was a heartbeat stronger than the last. Behind them, the town stirred with whispers of justice. Ahead, the world waited, untouched, wild, unforgiving, and free. She turned to Cheyenne. "Where now?" He didn't answer at first, just nodded toward the ridgeline, someplace high, where wind doesn't carry the weight of other sins. She followed. By nightfall, they reached a bluff overlooking a frozen lake, its surface breaking apart in wide, groaning cracks. They made camp beneath a thicket of old firs. The stars stretched above like flint sparks waiting to be struck. Clara sat close to the fire, cradling a hot cup of cedar tea. The baby moved, a fluttering within like a whisper that hadn't yet found words. "You never told me," she said, breaking the long silence. "About your wife. About what you lost." Cheyenne sat across from her, sharpening his knife in slow, rhythmic strokes. He paused. The blade glinted. "She was called Tana," he said finally. "She laughed with her whole body, sang when she worked, never sat still. Our child was coming when the settlers rode through our winter camp. Claimed we were hiding horses. They shot her first." Clara closed her eyes, swallowing hard. "I buried her in the snow with my own hands. Then I stopped speaking to the wind. I stopped singing. I stopped being anything but what the land needed to survive." He set the knife down, looked at her, really looked. "Then I found you." She held his gaze. "And what am I?" He didn't answer right away. Then, with quiet certainty, "The storm I forgot to believe in." Her breath caught. Not from romance. From recognition. They were two broken things that hadn't shattered when dropped. Just changed shape. The fire cracked between them. Coyotes howled in the distance. The night didn't feel empty. It felt alive. She leaned back, eyes skyward. "I'm not going back to that world." "No one's asking you to." "I don't mean the town," she said. "I mean the silence. The fear. The way I used to shrink myself just to be allowed to stay." Cheyenne rose, walked to the edge of the bluff, and looked out over the sleeping world below. "Then we make a place where no one has to shrink." In the weeks that followed, they did just that. Word of what happened in Bellstone spread. Slowly, unevenly, but it traveled like wildfire in dry grass. Other women came. Widows, outcasts, the shamed and silenced. Clara welcomed them with open arms. Cheyenne taught them how to live with the land, not just on it. They built shelters together, raised small fires, made soup, told stories, the kind never printed in gazettes or spoken in parlors. Clara delivered her child beneath a sky streaked in red and gold, gripping Cheyenne's hand so tightly he didn't speak for an hour afterward. It was a girl. They named her Tana. The night after her birth, Clara stepped outside the lodge, wrapped in a blanket of bison fur, the baby nestled to her chest. She looked out at the camp they'd built, smoke rising, laughter echoing between trees. Women who had once been shadows now stood like sentinels around the fire. Cheyenne joined her. "She's going to ask someday," Clara said, "about who her father was, why we're here." Cheyenne nodded. "You'll tell her the truth." "What truth?" He looked at her, his voice low and strong. "That the world thought you were weak, that they tried to shame you into silence, that you walked into fire anyway, that her mother was stronger than any storm, and that a warrior saw that and followed." Clara smiled. "Not because it was easy, because it was earned." "Will it ever stop?" she asked. "The cruelty, the weight of it." "No," Cheyenne said, "but we can teach her how to walk through it without being crushed." The baby stirred in her arms. Clara kissed her forehead, eyes shining. "I used to think love meant safety," she whispered. "Now I know it means choosing someone even when the world isn't safe, even when the truth burns." Cheyenne didn't reply. He didn't need to. He took her hand. And together, they stood beneath the stars, two souls forged in fire, raising a child in the ashes of a world that tried to erase them. The wind rose gently, tugging at their cloaks, as if to say, "I remember." And the land listened. And the story, once broken, became legend. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.